of course, we can all agree that we set an example for our students, and it's important that we set a positive example so that when they go on and progress in their learning journey, they've had that positive influence from us. The next is that we provide the power of education. So this point is pretty self-explanatory, and we are there to educate our students.
Yes.
The next is that teachers provide guidance. Now, I think this is an important point to make in terms of why teachers are important. And I feel that we have all played that role in providing guidance, whether it be to friends, to family members, to students. And it's important for teachers to be aware that we need to guide our students in the right direction when they might feel like they are a little bit lost. And then lastly, teachers facilitate learning and encourage motivation in a student's studies. Now, facilitating learning just means helping them through their challenges, giving them those tools that they need to achieve their goals, and then encourage that motivation to keep learning, maybe after our students have left us.
Yeah. So I will first start talking about what general characteristics we will find in a teacher, whether it's in ourselves or a teacher that we may have had in the past. The first being compassion. Now, compassion is really important in terms of a daily conversation that we might have with our student. If we compliment their successes and we talk to them about their day, it shows that we are engaging with them, and it encourages them to engage back with us. The second is passion for learning. So teachers need to care about their students. They need to be caring about their students as well as the subject. In that way, they will create a passion for their students in that learning and inspire them to want to come to class and learn new things about the subject. Understanding means that teachers need to be open and sympathetic to any needs that the student might have, especially considering any abilities they may or may not have, something that they might struggle with. And what goes hand in hand with that is patience. In order to be understanding, teachers need to have patience for their students. Some students may take a while to get there, and it is up to a teacher to go at the pace that the child needs. Next, like Rose said before, we need to be role models. We need to show our students right from wrong and guide them into the subject that we teach. We need to communicate across generations and cultures. So in your classroom, you may teach a number of different age groups and a number of students that come from different cultural backgrounds. You need to be understanding of those and never be biased against anything. And the last point is that willingness to put in the effort to always provide the best lesson for your students that they deserve. So we'll be moving on to a poll, which I will release for everybody. So our polling question is, what do you think the role of the teacher is? And we have a number of multiple choice questions here, multiple choice answers here that you may choose from. So the first is to manage your students. Secondly is to facilitate learning. Third is to prompt and encourage learning. Fourth, to keep students busy. And fifth, help and guide students to achieve their full potential.
Yeah. So you can choose as many as you feel you would like, and we can have a look at those. So that's great. Most people chose to manage students, to facilitate learning, to prompt and encourage learning. Mm-hmm. Definitely not to just keep students busy. And then lastly, another one is to help and guide our students to achieve their full potential. So that was great. So now let's move on to 6 roles of a teacher. Now, please bear in mind, these are not what you have to be when you are a teacher. These are just the most common roles teachers take up. So firstly, we're going to look at the teacher as a manager. Now, this can be a tricky subject to wrap your head around, but we need to be managers in order to facilitate that learning, to make sure our lesson objective is achieved at the end of the day, and to have that consistent structure in our classrooms. So let's take a look at how this role will help us. So this role will help us to take charge of that classroom. Now, I think we can all agree that we've been in classrooms where it's been a little bit chaotic and there might have been no structure or rules or anything like that set in place. So this role will really help us to take charge of that classroom and make sure everything goes according to plan. The next is that it will help us implement teaching techniques. It can be incredibly tricky when you feel out of control to try and implement teaching techniques. It might be new techniques you want to try, and you might feel that there just isn't a time and place to implement this. So when we have that control over our classroom, it makes it that much easier for us to implement those new teaching techniques and actually seeing them work or not work.
Yeah.
The next is to facilitate and guide learning. So being the manager in the classroom gives us that opportunity to facilitate that learning and then guide it in the right direction. So if we see our students or student, depending on if you're in a group lesson or just a one-to-one, is not really, grasping the concept, being in control makes it easy for us to adapt and adjust in order to guide their learning in the right direction. The second last is to demonstrate that behavior. So we always want to demonstrate positive behavior to our students because our students feed off our energy. So if we are, not prepared, if we are all over the place, if we are not in control of ourselves, that festers into our lesson, and our students 9 times out of 10 learn that behavior. So it's important for us to be able to, or have that opportunity to demonstrate that positive, good behavior in our classrooms. And then lastly, enforce appropriate class rules. If you're not in control of your classroom, you can't expect to enforce class rules. So being the manager just gives you that opportunity to do that.
So number 2 brings us to the role of the prompter. Now, the prompter is quite an important part of the ESL classroom, I would say, because it really brings in the next participation element that you want. By consistently making suggestions, which will help progress your students, you prompt them throughout. This really helps to build their confidence over time. They'll become more and more willing to participate with you with your added help. Through this encouragement, it brings along motivation for learning. So because you are prompting them and showing them that it's all right to maybe make mistakes and to help them break out of certain bad habits that they might have, you motivate them through showing them. And of course, like I said, you help them break out of comfort zones and move past what they thought they could do before and move beyond anything that might have been expected of them.
So now we're going to look at the teacher as a helper. And this is a pretty common role that I think we can all relate to. We've all been the helper in some part of our life, whether it be in teaching or just helping out a friend or, again, a family member. So let's have a look at how this will help you in the classroom and how it will help your students. So this role helps to offer help where needed. So if you are in that helper role, it makes it easy for you to be able to offer that help. You are open to helping your students, and it is so important to be the helper in the classroom, especially in ESL teaching when students are very vulnerable due to learning a new language that might be very tricky. They might not have that much confidence. So being there, offering that help and reinforcing I would say, asking for help is okay. So that's another important point, is to make sure your students know it's okay to ask for help when they need it. This role helps to provide students with language they lack when communicating. So again, this point is very relevant to ESL teaching, as this is a common problem that you would, or not problem, struggle that you would pick up with ESL teaching, that most of our students struggle to communicate because they lack the vocabulary. They might not know what the word means. So when we are helpers, we are able to provide our students with that language they need to communicate properly. And then lastly, to be able to adapt and adjust teaching to help all students succeed. So later in the webinar, we will talk about every student as an individual, and this is an important point, is to be able to adapt and adjust where needed to make sure that you meet every single student's need, whether it be academically or maybe even personally. So this is a great point to just be aware of.
So that brings us to number 4, which is the teacher as the assessor. Now, obviously, assessor, meaning assessment, it tells us that we need to give feedback in this role. So feedback that we give in our classroom should always try to be constructive and useful for the student so that they can take the feedback and move forward from it. We need to encourage correction techniques that are very helpful to them. We don't want to hinder them in the corrections that we make or make them feel demotivated through that. Good to remember from a very early age that it's nice to implement self-correction techniques, because this type of feedback really boosts their confidence over time. When they feel like they can correct their own mistakes, I often like to help them by saying to them, can you find what is wrong in the sentence, and ask them to then fix it. Of course, assessing students, we need to look at all of their performance. So we need to look at various techniques of assessing them, using different types of testing and looking at every different type of skill that they may need when they move past the classroom, so that they can have a variety of understanding of their own feedback and of their own progress.
Point number 5 is the preparer. Now, I know we've covered the importance of preparation in earlier webinars, past webinars, but this is an extremely important role that a teacher plays, because if we are unprepared, we cannot deliver a successful lesson. So let's just have a look at how this role can help us. So firstly, it helps us to plan lessons specific to students. Now, when working with so many students, we need to make sure we have a good understanding of their strengths, weaknesses, the things they are struggling with at the moment. This will help us plan the lesson to possibly help them overcome those challenges or work towards overcoming those challenges. And at the end of the lesson, meet their needs that they might have in that lesson. So we can only do this if we have planned properly. It will help us to adapt materials to meet students' needs. Now, especially with younger students, there is a lot of adaptation that needs to happen during the lesson. You might come across that they may be struggling to read and you weren't aware of this. You need to be able to adapt. You need to have that plan B in place, so that when that challenge comes up, you have something to fall back to, or you have a different resource to jump to. So it helps you to adapt those materials in order to make sure that the lesson runs smoothly and that the student is still getting the most out of their learning. It helps us to provide simple instructions. Again, if you have not planned for your lesson, and you're not familiar with the lesson content or the material you're teaching, it makes it incredibly difficult for you to adapt and simplify, because you won't be aware of what's coming next. And possibly that student might not understand what you are asking. So by having a good understanding of your lesson material and having prepared for it, you're able to easily simplify all those instructions and adapt where needed. And then, of course, find relevant resources to enhance learning. So this one is pretty straightforward. This just means that you have gone and done a bit of research and found some relevant resources to help facilitate that learning in the lesson.
So that brings us to number 6, which is the role of the teacher as the tutor. Now, this role is very common in one-on-one lessons, of course, but it can also be applied to group lessons that you may have as well. Essentially, it comes down to the teacher becoming a facilitator or almost like a coach in their lessons. Instead of simply telling your students something, you're going to give them advice and guidance throughout. And I find this really important because it's quite an individualized thing for a teacher to do. You should be helping your students by clarifying these ideas. So way you can do this is by challenging them. Use a lot more extension. And as Rose said, bring in those extra resources that you found in your preparation. Challenge them and push them past what they might be doing in a group setting. It really is important as a tutor to pay individual attention to their needs and to maybe what they might need outside of a group. If you are teaching in a classroom, it's nice to have some of this throughout your lessons, because then your students start to feel like they are being heard and seen in their class. If you're in a one-to-one setting, it is really nice for you to create that relationship with your students and define those specific needs from early on. And as I said, it's a really important part of ESL because it means no student is left behind and no student feels out of place because they have their individual needs met.
Definitely. So now let's take a look at the importance of preparation. So preparation helps us to be a better teacher overall. I think we can all agree that we've got into writing an exam or a test and definitely not studied as much as we would have needed to and felt really unprepared and just no confidence in what we're doing. This is the same thing. So by preparing properly, it makes teachers an overall better teacher. You are going into the lesson with full confidence in your abilities, knowing what you will be teaching, knowing your students' strengths and weaknesses, and you are just confident in your abilities and being able to teach that lesson. The next is that it increases student performance and achievement. So when you are prepared, well, I can say that students are aware when we are unprepared. They can sense it. We are all over the place. We are not confident. We might not know the answers. They can tell. So it increases their performance when we are prepared. They feel that, they're getting the most out of their lesson. They are motivated to learn. The lesson has been prepared. You found those extra resources to facilitate where they might not have known, the answer or what the word meant. So it just brings a more dynamic approach to the lesson. It minimizes bad behavior and classroom issues. So this is just a general, if we are not prepared again, there can be those things that come up, bad behavior, and we don't know how to deal with it. We haven't prepared for that. We don't have a plan B in place when that would happen. So do you want to add anything there, Savannah?
Well, I was just going to say, to do with bad behaviors and to do with student performances, that when they see us stumble in a lesson, it's also a lot harder to get them back on track or for them to respect the classroom process. Yeah. And that can be really bad reflection on us. And we wouldn't want them to be in a position where they don't feel like learning because their teacher doesn't feel like teaching. It's not a nice place to put our students.
Definitely. And this ties in with last week's webinar where
Yes.
it's all about customer service. And
Yes.
part of our role in our role is to be
Yes.
prepared for our lesson. At the end of the day, our students are paying, they are our customers, and it is our responsibility to make sure that our lessons have been fully prepared so that we can offer them the best experience at the end of the day. It allows for adaptation and adjustment to meet students' needs. Now, we've covered this a lot of times during this webinar, but it is so true. To successfully adapt and adjust, we need to be fully prepared for any situation in the lesson, especially in online lessons, because so much can go wrong, and our lessons are only 30 minutes, 1 hour, depending on how long your lessons are. So we need to be flexible, and when we are prepared, we are able to be flexible. And lastly, it makes teachers more confident in their teaching. Like I said, going into exam, you haven't studied for it, it's the same thing. Going into a lesson, trying to teach a lesson that you haven't prepared for at all, it can't go very well. Maybe you're very lucky, but I doubt it. So I just want to mention this. When we prepare for our lessons, it is important to make sure we see every student as an individual, which means we need to take into account their needs, abilities, and level of understanding. That's what it means to see each student as an individual, knowing what their abilities are, knowing what their needs are, and then knowing their level of understanding.
And you know, just to add to that, I was going to say, if we prepare for ourselves, then if they surprise us with anything in a lesson, we are more likely to be able to work with those needs and those surprises and make it a better lesson for them. Definitely.
So education is not one size fits all. We can't generalize and teach in a general manner. We have to know that it is up to us to make sure that students are able to get the most out of each lesson. So that is a key thing to keep in mind, that education is not one size fits all, and our students have different needs and different abilities, and they are in different levels of their education.
So just as a quick aside, we'd just like to mention the current courses that are available. The first being the TEFL course, which is an 120-hour online TEFL course, which has been accredited by Accreditat and is now available on all different devices. So you can use it on your phone, your tablet, and your computer. We also have a flash sale at the moment for some CPD courses. These are really great courses because they have developed by teachers for teachers and cover things that you may experience in your classrooms, either online or in a physical classroom setting. They're currently available for pre-order, and there are lots of different courses on sale, but to name a few, we have a really nice and fun safeguarding course and a very interesting psychology course for individual learners. And of course, we also promote like lots of different content and more webinars just like this one on all of our different social platforms. So you can subscribe to our YouTube channels and go and follow us on all these different platforms to find our content and our resources.
Yeah, great. So now let's move on to why is seeing each student as an individual important? So firstly, it helps to close those learning gaps. If we are generalizing our teaching, we are not seeing that our students might be struggling with specific things. So to see each student as an individual, which means we know their strengths, their weaknesses, their abilities, all those kinds of things, it helps us to close those learning gaps that might come, when learning a second language or whatever subject it may be. It helps us to adjust material to better suit their learning styles, their abilities and their needs. So this is a pretty straightforward point. But when we see them as individuals, we know all those things, so we can adjust the material around that. And then it helps to build confidence in students. When we are treating them as an individual student, targeting those needs, targeting those strengths, those weaknesses, it helps to make them feel more confident in their learning and in their, challenges that they might have. It'll help them to build that confidence in trying. It encourages greater engagement and participation. If you feel like you are being, seen as an individual and all your needs are being met, and you can tell your teacher is trying, you're going to want to engage and you're going to want to participate. And then lastly, it allows students to work at their own pace, which is so key in any educational setting, physical classroom or online learning. All our students work at different paces, and we need to be aware of that, and we need to promote that. We need to let them know it's okay to take their time to work through things. We want to build their confidence and never break it down.
So that brings us to a question that we'd like to pose to you. If you have any answers, we'd love to hear them from you. What type of motivational techniques could teachers use in their classroom, whether it's online or in a physical classroom setting? And what motivational techniques do you use?
Yeah, so if you're watching the recording or you're watching the live stream, please comment down below. We'd love to hear your ideas. And we are going to take a look at some useful motivational techniques that you can implement in your classrooms, whether it be physical classrooms or in online lessons. So 5 techniques to use in your class. So let's start with number 1.
First one is to establish clear goals and to set expectations. Now, what this means is very straightforward, but it really needs to be thought of throughout your preparation. So by establishing clear goals and expectations, it creates a high motivation level in your student, and it really pushes them to do the best that they can in your classroom. It allows them to understand what can be expected of them. By communicating with them throughout your lesson, you're helping them to see the main aims and outcomes of each of those lessons. You're giving them more agency by giving them that information, because they will then understand what they'll be able to do by the end of this lesson or by the end of this level. And of course, that means you will facilitate their growth and their progress throughout your teaching with them.
So number 2 is to focus on growth. Now, again, this ties in with our growth mindset webinar. So please go check that out if you're interested in it. So how does this help us? Well, we can set small achievable goals to ensure constant progress. We never want to make our students feel overwhelmed after leaving our classrooms. So we shouldn't set goals and targets that might be out of reach for them. Break it down into smaller goals so that we know that they'll be able to achieve it. And then the end result would be that constant progress and the increase of their self-confidence, because they are achieving their goals as they're going through their learning journey. We can do this by encouraging the growth mindset. Now, what is the growth mindset? Well, that's just thinking I can achieve anything by working hard at it, by practicing, by not giving up, by realizing that mistakes are a stepping stone, and I'm going to be able to do anything I set my mind to. That is a key mindset we want to encourage in our classroom. And then lastly, we would celebrate and praise any kind of progress made, especially in ESL teaching, because it's already a daunting task to learn a second language. Celebrate and praise any kind of progress made, whether it be they did their homework for the first time. It might seem like a small thing, but I can guarantee you it will encourage that progress and that growth throughout their learning journey.
That brings us to the third one, which ties in really nicely with what Rose was saying. Rewards and recognition are very important throughout any type of classroom setting and with virtually any student. Rewards are really important for individual growth and achievement. So as Rose was saying before, we should base these things on what they do, even if that is a small progress that they've made. Tell them that they've done something well, and if they've moved beyond what was expected of them, that's a really great thing to praise. Use a reward system that will encourage them, and try to think about things that they like or things that you know they will respond to. So for some students, this will be a verbal thing all the time, whereas other students might like physical rewards. This doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't necessarily have to be sweets or something like that. You could do jumping up and down and high fives and stars in your classroom, whatever works for your age group and the gender or personality of your students. These will all really tie in nicely when you're deciding on the reward system that you use.
Great. So number 4 is students' interests. Now, this is very important in motivating students. I think we can all agree that we've been in our schools and having lessons that have just been, completely uninteresting to us. And this is the same for our students. When it's not interesting, you don't want to learn about it. You shut down. You don't want anything to do with it. So this is the same for our students. So let's take a look at why students' interests are so important. Well, learning focused on students' interests will increase that motivation. Like I said, if you are interested in the topic, you want to learn about it. You want to participate in the lesson. You want to, share your opinion. So it's key to make sure you know your students' interests. And you can do this by simply asking them, what do you like to do on the weekends? Or what is your favorite hobby? Simply by asking them, you can find out exactly what they like to do, because they would be more than happy to share it with you. It's a passion of theirs. So the next thing is that it is a great encourager for intrinsic motivation. Now, what is intrinsic motivation? This simply means doing it for the enjoyment. So you're not doing something for a reward at the end, or, a star in your star jar, whatever it may be. They are simply doing it because they are enjoying it and it is interesting to them. And this is something we want to encourage in our classroom. We want to have our students enjoy the lesson, getting them to come back time after time again, learning the most out of the lesson we are presenting. Students participate more due to being interested. I've already mentioned this, and it's so true. I think that, or at least I have had, a lesson here or there where I could tell the student just was not interested in the topic at all. And it made it so difficult. But with preparing for that lesson, I was able to adjust and try and, bring in some extra materials that might have interested them, or change the topic around a bit, just to keep him interested in the lesson. So again, preparation is key for this. And then it facilitates ongoing learning. So when you focus on your students' interests, it makes it so much easier to encourage that ongoing learning after your lessons ended, as they move through their learning journey.
That brings us to number 5, which is to develop positive and meaningful relationships with your students. We've kind of already spoken about this, but I think it's important to note that whether you have an individual one-on-one lesson or if you have a big group of students, the relationships that you make with them can really motivate them to want to learn and to want to come to class each day. So in order to motivate your students, you need to know your students. What do they like? What do they want to achieve in your classroom? The personality that they might have and how that interacts with maybe other students in your class. Give your students a safe place to learn and to feel comfortable and heard. It's important to allow them to be themselves. If we allow them freedom to share their ideas and their opinions, this is one step closer to the communication levels that we would like them to have, especially in an ESL setting. So by building that confidence in them, motivating them, showing them you care. When they think, oh, my teacher really likes me, or they like hearing about what I like, they want to share more, they want to learn more, and it will motivate them and encourage them to come and share those ideas with you.
And you can simply do this by remembering something they have told you,
Yes.
2 lessons ago. I do this all the time. If my students are telling me they're going on a trip to whichever country, or, they wrote a maths exam,
Yes.
I love to ask them about those things they've mentioned before. And that is a simple way to show that you care and you are interested in your students' lives, in what's going on outside of the classroom. And I can guarantee that that means a lot to them. You can tell by the way their behavior changes, oh, you remembered. So that is a quick and easy way for you to just show that little bit of care and interest in your student.
Yeah.
So now we are moving on to our Q&A. So if you have any questions, please, you can ask now, or you can just comment them down below, and we'd love to hear your questions and interact with you. So please let us know. So if there are no questions, now we will go on to our last quote, which I think is great as well. So a teacher affects eternity. He or she can never tell where his or her influence stops. So this is so true. This is everything we've mentioned. You have a huge influence on your students. And if you have a negative influence on a student, I can almost guarantee that that student will remember that for a very, very long time. So just always try and have that positive influence. Do your best, prepare for your lessons, make sure you're ready, your students as best as you can. And I think everything will go according to plan and run smoothly.
Definitely.
So again, our IQ TEFL is available, and there's currently a flash sale. It's available on all devices. So if you want to do it on your laptop, on your iPad, on your cell phone, you're more than welcome to. It's fully accredited by Accreditat. And this course is developed for teachers by teachers. So please head over to iqtefl.com if you are interested in our TEFL course. Like Savannah mentioned, our CPD courses are available for pre-order now, and they are on sale at an amazing price. I have bought my course and I'm so excited to start it. So if you are interested, please sign up, and please head over again to iqtefl.com for more information. And as always, for more webinars and content like this, remember to click subscribe to our YouTube channel to be notified first for when our videos are released and when our webinars will be happening. We share content daily on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest, and they are extremely useful for online teachers as well as teachers in a physical classroom. So please head over to all our platforms to check that out. So thank you so much for coming to our webinar this week. And please remember to subscribe. And if you would like to watch any of our previous webinars, you can just click on the box below. So thank you so much for coming, and we will see you next week.